Hey, what's up, New Zealand and the world? Lucas Lawman's Kiwi Voice here in Blenheim for the Taxpayers Union Stop Three Waters Roadshow. Stopped in Blenheim. We're about to kick off. There is a decent crowd, as you can probably see behind me and around me. Real true Kiwis concerned about the direction that this Three Waters legislation is taking us. So we're going to try and catch some of the speeches. We're going to try and talk to the Taxpayers Union representative. It is a bit windy, so we'll get a bit of buffeting, but we'll see how we get on. And we've also got Mayor John Leggat afterwards. So let's get amongst it.
Identify themselves, perhaps by putting their hands up. I see one.
There's more than one out there. There's another one down there.
Brilliant. I see two. I think I might see three. Three. Good. Any elected representative is welcome and in fact encouraged to say a few words after I give my short stump speech. If that's you, please come up to the side of the stage and introduce yourself to me. Forgive me if I don't know your name by sight, but I promise I try to learn it. Now, my name's Louis. I'm from the New Zealand Taxpayers Union. Now, I've taken over on the Stop Three Waters Roadshow for the leg that stretches from Invercargill all the way up to here in Blenheim. And later today, we're crossing the Cook Strait to continue on in the North Island. And we've seen incredible turnouts of New Zealanders across the South Island. First in Christchurch, then in Fairlie, in Ashburton, in Rolleston, in Alexandra, in Wanaka, in Queenstown, in Balclutha, in Gore, in Invercargill, in Timaru, in Oamaru, in Amberley. Day before yesterday in Nelson, and finally here in Blenheim. Thank you so much for coming. I really have to hand it to you. Fantastic. After I give my speech, I believe we'll have a few local representatives saying a few words. Most of you will probably understand the gist of the Three Waters regime that this government has proposed, but I'd like to run through a very basic version of it. It's a really convoluted and bureaucratic regime, so I'll be working hard to make it simple. Currently, your local water assets, into which you have invested millions and millions and millions of dollars of ratepayer money, are controlled by your local council. Now, different local councils in different parts of the country have had a mixed track record on maintaining their infrastructure, on investing to maintain their infrastructure. Some have done a good job, some have done a pretty crappy job. However, your local council, it's not just the devil you know, it's the devil that you can vote out. And that's arguably the best definition of democracy, that you can vote the bastards out. Under the government's proposed regime, control of these water assets will be removed from your local council and be placed into the hands of one of four mega large water monopolies. I believe here your new water entity will stretch from Marlborough all the way up through to the Hawke's Bay and the East Coast. So firstly, there's the question of, if you've got an issue with your water services, do you expect attentive, customised service from Wellington or from the Hawke's Bay for your region?
No.
More importantly, do you expect that the people making the decisions will have an incentive to deliver value to you as ratepayers? See, usually a local monopoly, they have an incentive to deliver value, and that's because you can vote them out. If it's a private business, I don't know, you might be able to go to a competitor. Under this regime, you've got neither avenue available to you. There will be four layers of bureaucracy separating you as ratepayers from the decision makers of these new entities. Only one of these four layers of bureaucracy, your regional representation group, is even nominally democratic. But it's an organisation that will be made up of councillors from across, I believe, 20 councils within your wider region. So you'll be lucky if you have one or two representatives on this group. In addition to that, this group is also 50-50 co-governed with iwi, which further dilutes the lines of accountability and dilutes the incentive for the decision makers to deliver value to you as ratepayers. And that's where we come from at the Taxpayers Union. We come at this from a value for money perspective. We stand for lower taxes, less waste, more transparency. We don't believe that removing democratic accountability and implementing monopoly water providers will ever provide lower costs. We certainly don't believe it will result in less waste. And in terms of transparency and accountability, it's a dog's breakfast. And I believe some of the councillors may want to address this fiction that you as ratepayers or you as your local councils will still own these assets. That's the line, that's the absurd line that the government is pursuing. See, the government seems to believe that ownership, all ownership is a few words on a piece of paper. But actually in the real world, ownership has a meaning. Ownership involves the rights of control of your assets. And I can tell you, and experienced lawyers and barristers such as Gary Judd QC can tell you, when you lose the rights of ownership, you lose the bloody ownership. Now, we've had some major news last week from Wellington. The Labour Party used their majority in Parliament to pass the first reading of the core Three Waters legislation. But all is not lost, in fact far from it. We are quietly confident that we can still stop Three Waters. That's because the legislation is now referred to Parliament's Finance and Expenditure Select Committee. This is a group of MPs that will hear public submissions on the legislation before reporting back on the 11th of November later this year. And the good news is that we have built an army of New Zealanders, an army of 100,000 New Zealanders who have signed the petition to stop Three Waters and who are ready to give these MPs hell. Now, there are many reasons, I'm sure, that you articulate people can give to these MPs why local democratic control is so key, not just to value for money and democracy. But we come at it from a simple perspective at the Taxpayers Union. Or at least we have a simple message for the MPs on the Select Committee. And it's a message that we hope that all of you will consider including in your submissions. As a Member of Parliament, as a member of our House of Representatives, it's not good enough for you to barricade yourself in your dusty office in Wellington and hear submissions in writing or over Zoom. What the MPs need to do is what we're doing. They need to hit the road. They need to visit the ratepayers face to face. They need to hear the concerns of the civic leaders, of the local leaders, who have so far been denied a full and honest consultation. Remember, your local council and local councils across the country, they were given an opportunity to provide feedback on the Three Waters regime, but they were given that opportunity under a false premise. They were told that Three Waters would be a voluntary regime, that it would be opt-in. Well, people started asking questions about what the Minister was actually saying behind the scenes, what the Cabinet plans actually had in writing, and it turned out that throughout that process, she'd already made up her mind. She already knew it would be a compulsory regime, whether you like it or not. The government's position is, we must do something. Three Waters is something, so we must do Three Waters. That's a fallacy. So the MPs on the Select Committee, I'm going to name them, just to make it real. Duncan Webb, Barbara Edmonds, Andrew Bailey, Ingrid Leary, Anna Lorke, Greg O'Connor, Damien Smith, Louis Haulbrooke, Simon Watts, Helen White, and Nicola Willis. We'll be asking them to come on down to Blenheim and hear from you, face to face. Find out what Kiwis outside of Wellington, here in the productive sector, think of some of the Ngai Mahuta's claims. For starters, who here believes that Three Waters will improve efficiency while at the same time delivering thousands of high-paying jobs? Exactly. And who believes that once responsibility for water services is removed from your local council, that your local council will then not just cut your rates, but cut your rates to the extent that it offsets the new water bills? You'll be receiving 2 bills in the mail now, one from your council and one from the new unaccountable water entity. And we're meant to believe that this will lower costs. It's absurd. And of course there's the co-governance issue. Well, there are many good reasons why we should be concerned about any fundamental challenge to our democratic tradition of one person, of one vote. But at the Taxpayers Union, we ask a simple question to ratepayer groups and taxpayer groups in every part of the country. Here's the question. Do you think co-governance will result in lower taxes or higher taxes?
Higher taxes.
Exactly. So it wasn't difficult for us to figure out where we stand on this issue. And finally, has Nanaima Huda forgotten that many councils themselves are already in fact implementing co-governance? They're implementing co-governance internally. So what then happens under Three Waters when an iwi group shares power on a 50-50 basis with a group of councils that are themselves co-governed or even 50-50 co-governed? Your original 50-50 starts to go out the window pretty damn quickly. And some of the MPs on the government side of the House and Parliament, they've been complaining recently. They've been complaining that the Three Waters debate has turned toxic. That it's become focused on co-governance. And to be honest, they're right, it has. But whose fault is that? Who managed to muddy the waters in a debate that should have been about value for money, that should have been about water infrastructure? Who was it that muddied the waters by shoehorning in such a drastic change to our democratic tradition? It was the government. Now, I'm going to wrap up here because I understand we do have a few more potential speakers. I'd first like to invite any and every local representative, starting with local councillors, who'd like to say a few words, perhaps on the local context. And after that, I understand we have a representative from Groundswell who'd like to say a few words too. And we may have space for a few more community speakers after that. Thank you.
An uprising right through the country around this model. That's the question we've got to ask. When the decisions and discussions started around Three Waters, and it's going back some time now, we were told that we needed a consistent water quality right through New Zealand. Some councils, some areas hadn't put the resourcing into their water infrastructure like we have here in Marlborough. And so we needed to get a common standard, and we always hark back to Havelock North and what happened up there. Nobody wants that on their doorstep. We were told about environmental outcomes and how important that was. Nobody disputes that at all. So we got drawn into this conversation, and as time went on, we were fed more information. Then it came down to the opt-in, opt-out option that we had. And as a council, we put a lot of effort into trying to educate ourselves, and there's some pretty complex discussions that were had around how these models were working. But we also wanted to take a really balanced approach out to the community. But what I can tell you is that over that 3 or 4 month period, I had hundreds, probably thousands of people that said to me, this is not something that Marlborough District Council should be involved with. And I had one person that said, oh, I think this Three Waters reform's got a lot of merit. But when I asked them, well, what's the merit in the Three Waters reform as proposed, they couldn't really tell me, so I sort of discounted that. So that was the message that we got really early. So our decision to join Communities for Local Democracy was really quite straightforward and quite simple. We're one of 31 councils. There's 67 throughout New Zealand. We're one of 31 that have joined Communities for Local Democracy. So we've got a very strong voice. We know there are other councils or councillors within councillors that want to join Communities for Local Democracy as well. So we know it's got a really strong foundation through local government. We also have Auckland City Council, and Phil Goff was the minority decision in that working group and said, this is not for us. They represent 1.6 million people. So combine the numbers, we're well over half the population of New Zealand that opposes this reform in its current model. We have looked at, as part of the Communities for Local Democracy, at another model which could work. There's efficiencies that can be had in combining some skills and procurement. We understand that, but we think a more regionalised model where we all retain our own assets, infrastructure, is the best way to go. Look, there is a an opportunity through the select committee process for us to put our next best foot forward, and I can assure you, as we have right along this path, we're going to submit to that, and we'd encourage everybody that has got any drive to try and make some changes to this reform process to also lodge an opportunity to submit to the select committee. It is going to be a numbers game. We need to send a really loud and clear message that this reform needs to be reworked. One of our really strong submissions for Communities for Local Democracy is to say, look, let's take a step back. We know all this information's out there now. Let's look, take the time to really dive into it. They talk about this being intergenerational reform. Well, let's take the time to get it right. And at the moment, we're being led in a very quick pathway, and I think it's a danger for all of us right through the country.
Hey, what's up, New Zealand and the world? Lucas Lawman's Kiwi Voice, standing with Louis, who's been fronting this particular stop and the rest of the Three Waters Roadshow. So, Louis, how does it make you feel to see all these people out here today opposing Three Waters?
Well, it's amazing. I reckon we had 200 or maybe even 250 people here in Marlborough District. That shows that we are really building momentum. I think you were at our Christchurch event.
I was, yeah.
Now, we only gave people 2 days' notice for that. We had about 100 show up. Yeah. So now getting 250 in Blenheim. We want to keep that momentum going as we move to the North Island all the way up to Northland.
Yeah, so what is, for the viewers, what are the next stops on the tour?
Sure, so day after tomorrow we're doing Wellington, Pororua, Lower Hutt, and then I believe we're heading up to Whanganui and we're zigzagging up the North Island all the way up to Mangawhai is currently our northernmost point.
Awesome. And what's the plan once the roadshow's all done and dusted? What are the Taxpayers Union, what's their next steps?
Sure, the next big phase of the campaign is the public submission process. So this is when the MPs hear public submissions. We'll be encouraging people to submit en masse and not just make various points against Three Waters, but actually call on the members of Parliament to hit the road to hear submissions in purpose, which they have done on contentious issues before. We think Three Waters warrants it.
Oh, absolutely. Awesome. That's good clarification. Appreciate it. That's all we need. Awesome to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate. We gratefully have got Mayor of Blenheim, John Leggat, standing with us. I hope I've pronounced your surname correctly. Just have a quick couple of words about what's just happened in front of us now. So how does it make you feel, John, to see all these people coming out to oppose this Three Waters legislation?
Look, I'm really not surprised at the turnout today. It's a really good turnout. And just scanning around the crowd, there's a lot of very fair-minded Marlburians amongst them. So it's a good representation. I was really pleased with the turnout.
Yeah, awesome. So on a day-to-day sort of basis, are you getting submissions, emails, calls, that sort of thing about this issue?
Look, at various times we've been inundated with emails, and as I mentioned during the proceedings today, I can only ever recall one person that came to me in support of the Three Waters reform in its current form. So, yeah, there's been a massive opposition, if you like, to the reform process that's been rolled out to date.
Yeah, awesome. That's just for the last thing then, Mayor John. I'd just like to sort of clarify. I know we've got video, we've seen you speak, etc. as well, but just nice and clear for the viewers of Kiwi Voice. What is the Marlborough District Council's position on the Three Waters reforms in their current form?
Right, very, very simply, we oppose the reform in its current form. We're part of the Communities for Local Democracy. We think there's much better models to roll out here. Look, we've got a district as well, and I would like to make this point.
Yes.
Where we're going to, part of our southern Marlborough is going to be part of Entity D and the rest of Marlborough Entity C. Now, you explained to me, or someone explained to me, how does that lead to better water quality, drinking water quality and better environmental outcomes? It just has no logic, and I question that behind this reform process.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much for your time. That is awesome. Really good to meet you.
Nice
and
to meet you.
keep an eye on Kiwi Voice on Facebook, YouTube and our website.
We will.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Good to meet you.
Nice
that was
to meet
awesome.
you too.
Perfect.